Old Man Logan. Old Man Logan wasn't just an older version of Wolverine, he was a broken man haunted by the worst thing he ever did. In his world, the villains finally organized and launched a coordinated attack on all the heroes at once. Logan was defending the X-Mansion when a horde of enemies stormed through the gates. He went into a berserker rage, slicing through dozens of attackers to protect his home and his family. But when the fighting stopped and the bodies piled up, Mysterio's illusion faded. Logan hadn't been fighting villains at all. He had slaughtered every single X-Man with his own claws. Jean Grey, Cyclops, Storm, even Jubilee, all dead by his hands. The trauma shattered him completely. He vowed never to pop his claws again and retreated into hiding. 50 years later, America had fallen. The villains divided the country among themselves, with the Red Skull claiming the Eastern Territories and ruling from the White House wearing Captain America's stolen uniform. Logan became a farmer, trying to live peacefully with his wife and children while paying rent to the Hulk Gang, a group of inbred Hulk descendants who terrorized the wastelands. When an aged Hawkeye showed up needing help crossing the country, Logan initially refused. But after the Hulk Gang murdered his entire family for being late on rent, something inside him snapped. He popped his claws for the first time in decades and went on a rampage, hunting down every member of the Hulk Gang. He even killed Banner himself, letting the Hulk eat him alive before regenerating inside his stomach and clawing his way out. This wasn't heroism, it was pure vengeance. Old Man Logan became a wandering nightmare, a reminder that even heroes have breaking points. He's not evil in the traditional sense, but he's no longer the hero he once was. Just a tired old killer who lost everything that mattered. Weapon Omega. In the Age of Apocalypse timeline, Logan never became Wolverine. Instead, he became Weapon X under Apocalypse's regime, but he managed to escape before the full programming took hold. He joined Magneto's resistance and fell in love with Jean Grey. For a while, he had something worth fighting for. Then Cyclops, jealous and bitter, murdered him in cold blood. But death wasn't the end. Years later, the Celestials arrived, and reality itself began collapsing. Logan was resurrected, but he came back wrong. He returned as Weapon Omega, a twisted version corrupted by celestial energy and fueled by rage. He blamed the X-Men for everything that went wrong, for John's death, for the world's destruction, for his own suffering. Weapon Omega declared himself the new Apocalypse and began systematically hunting down every remaining mutant. He believed the only way to save what was left of reality was to end the age of mutants entirely. His claws could now cut through anything, even adamantium, and his healing factor had been enhanced to godlike levels. He killed his own son from an alternate timeline, slaughtered dozens of X-Men variants, and absorbed the life force of anyone who stood against him. Unlike other villains who claimed to have noble goals, Weapon Omega was purely destructive. He didn't want to rule or reshape the world. He wanted to burn it all down and salt the earth. His crusade only ended when reality itself collapsed around him. But even then, his legacy of destruction echoed across the multiverse. He wasn't just an evil Wolverine, he was Wolverine's apocalypse. Dark Wolverine. Daken Akihiro wasn't just Wolverine's son, he was everything Logan feared he could have become without the X-Men to guide him. Born in Japan during World War II, Daken was cut from his dying mother's womb by Romulus, a shadowy figure who manipulated both their lives. Raised to be a weapon, Daken grew up believing his father had abandoned him and murdered his mother. This lie poisoned him completely. Unlike Logan, who struggled with his animal nature, Daken embraced it. He was beautiful, charming, and utterly sociopathic. His claws could secrete pheromones that manipulated emotions, making people love him, fear him, or trust him implicitly. He used this power without hesitation or remorse, playing with people's feelings like a puppet master. When he finally met his father, there was no tearful reunion. Daken tried to destroy everything Logan cared about. He joined Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers, taking the Wolverine mantle for himself and using it to commit atrocities in his father's name. He manipulated the Fantastic Four, seduced heroes and villains alike, and orchestrated elaborate schemes purely for his own amusement. What made Daken truly dangerous wasn't his powers, it was his mind. He was a strategic genius who planned 10 steps ahead, always leaving himself an escape route and someone else to take the fall. He didn't just want to kill his father, he wanted to break him, to prove that Logan's heroism was meaningless and that violence was the only truth. Even when Logan tried to reach out, tried to be the father Daken never had, it was too late. The poison had sunk too deep. Daken's story is a tragedy, but it's also a horror story about what happens when someone with Wolverine's powers has absolutely no moral compass. He's not just evil, he's empty. Wolverine, Lord of the Vampires. In an alternate timeline where Dracula was defeated, someone needed to take the throne of the vampire nation. That someone was Logan. It started when a vampire cult targeted Jubilee, one of the few people Logan truly cared about. She was turned into a vampire, and Logan made a choice. Instead of mercy killing her like he'd done to so many others, he let her live. But keeping her alive meant keeping her fed, and that meant compromise after compromise, until Logan found himself making deals with vampire lords. When Dracula fell, the vampire nation was in chaos. Logan saw an opportunity. If he became their king, he could control them, keep them from slaughtering innocents, maybe even find a cure for Jubilee. So he challenged every vampire lord who stood against him, killing them one by one until none dared oppose him. Then he took Dracula's throne and declared himself Lord of the Vampires. But power corrupts, especially immortal power. Logan discovered that vampire blood could heal his psychological scars, numb the centuries of pain and guilt he carried. He started drinking it regularly, and with each sip he became less human and more monster. He ruled the vampires with an iron fist, but he also fed their expansion. Under his leadership, vampires spread across the globe, creating vast feeding farms where humans were bred like cattle. He told himself it was necessary, that he was preventing something worse, but deep down, he knew the truth. He'd become exactly what he always hunted. The X-Men eventually came for him, trying to save their friend from himself. Logan fought them off, not because he believed in what he'd become, but because he couldn't face the shame of what he'd allowed himself to turn into. He remained on that throne, a king of monsters, slowly losing every shred of humanity that once defined him. He's not evil because he wants to be. He's evil because he's tired of fighting it. Jimmy Hudson, Ultimate Universe gone wrong. In the Ultimate Universe, Wolverine had a son named Jimmy Hudson, who didn't know his true parentage until after Logan died. Jimmy was raised by normal parents and lived a relatively normal life until his mutant powers manifested. At first, he tried to be a hero like his father, joining the X-Men and fighting the good fight. But then, everything went wrong. The mutant-hating organization called the Purifiers captured him and subjected him to the same Weapon X procedures that created his father. They broke him down physically and psychologically, trying to turn him into their perfect anti-mutant weapon. The torture awakened something dark inside Jimmy, something he inherited from Logan's worst instincts. When he finally escaped, he wasn't the same idealistic kid anymore. He was something cold and calculating. Unlike his father, who fought his animal nature, Jimmy leaned into it. He started hunting down Purifiers one by one, not for justice, but for revenge. He justified every murder, every brutal killing, telling himself he was protecting mutants. The line between protection and persecution blurred quickly. He became paranoid, seeing enemies everywhere, trusting no one. When the X-Men tried to intervene, he saw them as obstacles. He fought Kitty Pryde, nearly killed Iceman, and declared that mutants needed a killer, not a hero. His descent accelerated when he discovered that some of his father's old enemies were still alive. He tracked down Silver Samurai, Sabretooth's disciples, and anyone connected to the Weapon X program. He didn't just kill them, he made examples of them, leaving their bodies displayed as warnings. The X-Men branded him a terrorist. The government put a bounty on his head. But Jimmy didn't care. He'd convinced himself that he was doing what Logan never had the courage to do, finishing the job. In reality, he'd become exactly what the Weapon X program wanted, a living weapon without conscience or restraint. He's proof that even Wolverine's heroic legacy can be twisted into something monstrous. Sabretooth pretending to be Wolverine. This one's twisted because it's not technically a Wolverine variant, but it's too disturbing not to mention. After one of their many brutal fights, Sabretooth didn't just want to kill Logan, he wanted to replace him. Using advanced technology and shape-shifting abilities, Sabretooth disguised himself as Wolverine and infiltrated the X-Mansion. For weeks, he lived Logan's life, sleeping in his room, training with his teammates, even getting close to Jean Grey. But the entire time, he was slowly poisoning the team from within. He sabotaged missions, planted seeds of distrust, and gathered intelligence on every X-Man's weaknesses. The most horrifying part was how good he was at it. Sabretooth knew Logan so well that he could mimic his mannerisms perfectly. He knew when Logan would crack a joke, when he'd lose his temper, when he'd show vulnerability. He became Logan's shadow, a dark reflection that even telepaths couldn't detect. When he finally revealed himself, the damage was catastrophic. He'd turned the X-Men against each other, stolen critical secrets, and worst of all, he'd violated their trust in the most intimate way possible. Some relationships never recovered. Jean Grey couldn't look at the real Logan the same way. Cyclops questioned whether he'd ever truly known his teammate. The psychological scars lasted longer than any physical wound. This version represents something more terrifying than just an evil Wolverine. It's the fear that the person you trust most isn't who they claim to be. Sabretooth proved that he didn't need to beat Logan in combat. He just needed to make everyone doubt him. And in some ways, that victory was more complete than any death could ever be. Age of X Wolverine. In the Age of X timeline, mutants lost the war against humanity. They were hunted to near extinction, forced into a single fortress where they made their last stand against an endless army. In this reality, Logan wasn't a hero or even an X-Man. He was the keeper of the graves, responsible for disposing of the bodies and maintaining the memorial wall where dead mutants' names were carved. But his real role was far darker. Wolverine had been psychologically broken by years of constant warfare. He'd been forced to mercy kill countless injured mutants who couldn't be saved, putting down friends, teammates, and innocents because medical supplies were non-existent, and leaving them alive meant attracting more human forces. Every death was a strategic necessity, and Logan bore that burden alone. Over time, it changed him fundamentally. He stopped seeing individuals and started seeing numbers, casualties, acceptable losses. When younger mutants questioned strategy, he silenced them, not with arguments, but with cold calculations about survival rates. He became the fortress's executioner, the one who made the impossible choices no one else could stomach. He killed mutants who broke under pressure and threatened to expose their location. He executed humans they captured rather than waste resources on prisoners. He even put down mutants who were too injured to fight but not injured enough to die quickly. His reasoning was always the same. It was them or everyone else. The other mutants feared him as much as they needed him. He was judge, jury, and executioner, operating outside any moral framework except pure survival. When the Age of X reality was revealed to be a psychic construct created by Legion, Wolverine was one of the few who didn't want to leave. He'd become so accustomed to making life and death decisions, so comfortable with killing, that the real world's moral complexities felt foreign. He'd found purpose in being a monster, and giving that up meant confronting what he'd become. This version shows that Logan doesn't need to be corrupted by outside forces. Sometimes, circumstances alone can turn him into something unrecognizable. Wolverine of Earth 807128, Old Man Logan's Villainous Path. This is a variation of Old Man Logan, but one where he didn't stop after killing the Hulk gang. After getting his revenge, Logan realized something terrible. Violence felt good again. For 50 years, he'd suppressed his berserker rage, convinced himself he could live peacefully. But the moment he let it out, the moment he felt his claws sink into flesh again, all those decades of restraint evaporated. He started hunting. First, it was villains, the ones who divided America and deserved justice. But justice quickly became vengeance, and vengeance became habit. He tracked down every villain who'd participated in the hero's fall. He killed the Red Skull by forcing him to choke on Captain America's shield. He hunted down Dr. Doom's descendants. He went after anyone who'd profited from the hero's deaths. The Avengers, what few remained, tried to stop him. He killed them too. Logan convinced himself he was cleaning up the world, making it safe again. But really, he was just indulging the part of himself he'd always feared. He became the Wasteland's nightmare, a legend whispered about in terrified voices. Some called him a folk hero, others called him the new apocalypse. He didn't care about either label. He just kept killing. Eventually, he ran out of villains and started targeting anyone he deemed corrupt. Politicians who'd collaborated with the villain territories, businessmen who'd exploited survivors, even civilians who'd stayed silent while heroes died. His definition of guilt expanded until everyone was complicit. By the end, he was no different from the villains he'd once hunted, maybe worse because he'd once known better. This version of Logan proves that redemption isn't permanent. One bad day, one moment of giving in, can undo decades of growth. He's not evil because he was corrupted or brainwashed. He's evil because he chose to be, because it was easier than continuing to resist. Phoenix Force Wolverine. When the Phoenix Force shattered during Avengers vs. X-Men, 5 X-Men became hosts to its cosmic power. But in an alternate timeline, something went wrong. The Phoenix didn't fragment among 5 hosts. It chose only one. Logan. At first, he tried to use the power responsibly, to rebuild the mutant race and protect the innocent. But the Phoenix Force doesn't just grant power, it amplifies everything about its host. Logan's rage, his guilt, his self-destructive tendencies, all of it got magnified to cosmic levels. He started by reshaping the world to protect mutants, creating sanctuaries where they could live without fear. But protection became control, and control became domination. Anyone who threatened mutants, even potentially, was eliminated. He burned entire cities that harbored anti-mutant sentiment. He resurrected dead mutants without their consent, forcing them back to life because he decided the world needed them. The other X-Men tried to talk him down, but Phoenix Wolverine saw them as obstacles to his vision. He killed Cyclops for questioning his methods. He incinerated Emma Frost for trying to take the Phoenix from him. He even fought Jean Grey's psychic ghost, screaming that he was doing what she'd never had the strength to do. The Phoenix Force fed on his trauma, using his centuries of pain as fuel. Every person he'd failed to save, every friend he'd lost, every moment of suffering became justification for his tyranny. He convinced himself that if he just had enough power, he could prevent all future suffering. But the Phoenix doesn't prevent suffering, it creates it. His reign ended when the Phoenix Force consumed him entirely, burning away everything that made him Logan, until only the cosmic fire remained. In his final moments, he realized he'd become exactly what he'd always feared, a weapon of mass destruction, beautiful and terrible and completely out of control. Ultimate Wolverine, Ultimatum Timeline. The Ultimate Universe's Wolverine started as a hero, but the Ultimatum event changed everything. When Magneto triggered massive floods that killed millions, including many of Wolverine's closest friends, something inside Logan broke permanently. He'd already been more violent than his 616 counterpart, more willing to kill, less restrained. But after Ultimatum, he stopped pretending to be a hero altogether. He left the X-Men and became a lone operative, taking assassination contracts and hunting down villains with extreme prejudice. But he wasn't picky about targets. If someone paid enough, or if he decided someone deserved death, that was enough justification. He killed corrupt politicians, crime bosses, even heroes he deemed too soft to do what was necessary. When Nick Fury tried to recruit him for Black Ops missions, Logan agreed, but operated entirely on his own terms. He'd complete missions but leave trails of bodies that made even SHIELD uncomfortable. His methods became so brutal that Captain America personally tried to bring him in. The fight destroyed 3 city blocks and ended with Logan walking away while Cap lay in rubble. The breaking point came when he discovered that some of his old Weapon X handlers were still alive, conducting experiments on mutant children. He didn't just kill them, he tortured them for weeks, extracting every piece of information before finally ending their lives. He then tracked down everyone connected to the program, including scientists who'd left decades ago and were living peaceful lives. To Logan, there was no statute of limitations on complicity. This version of Wolverine represents the logical endpoint of his violent nature, without any moral anchors. No Xavier to guide him, no Jean Grey to humanize him, no X-Men to pull him back from the edge. Just pure predator instinct wrapped in adamantium and rage. He's not evil because he enjoys it. He's evil because he no longer sees any reason not to be. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Wolverine's darkest variants, I post comic book content regularly here, covering everything from X-Men theories to multiverse explanations. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching and see you next time, darlings.